I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Rose Petal murder. A 41-year-old mom is found brutally killed surrounded by rose petals. It's a bizarre crime scene, but it's an even more bizarre story. Take a listen. 41-year-old Christina Parcell was found brutally murdered on the morning of October 13th, 2021. This shocking scene in the peaceful suburban community of Greer, South Carolina, absolutely stunned everyone. Then, when more details were revealed, the case became even more stunning. Investigators found a seemingly staged crime scene, including the spreading of rose petals around Christina's dead body. The community wondered, was this some sort of a sick serial killer on the loose? Then, investigators made an arrest. Actually, 2 arrests. Christina's boyfriend, Bradley Post, and the father of Christina's young daughter, music producer John Mello. 2 arrests, but neither was charged with murder. The boyfriend, Bradley Post, was arrested for child pornography charges, and Mello, the father of her daughter, with custodial interference. Then, deputies from the Greenville County Sheriff's Office arrested a 3rd man, Zachary David Hughes, on November 3rd, 2021. They charged him with the murder of Christina Parcell. Investigators say the physical evidence is strong, but the connection to the victim was unknown. Hughes was a classically trained and well-accomplished pianist who had a scholarship to Juilliard. This twist was yet another stunning moment in this tragic case, now known as the Rose Petal murder. Really a different kind of case. There's something going on here. This is not a usual situation. Like a staged, it's almost like a movie, right? You're putting these rose petals at the crime scene. Like, it's different. And some of the people involved have some interesting circumstances, like Bradley Post, who is the victim's fiance. But as you heard, he's been arrested, charged with child pornography. Pretty serious allegations. But I want you to take a listen here to him testifying, part of the prosecution's case, trying to find out what was going on in the life of the victim, Christina Parcell.
Do you know the victim in this case, Christina Parcell?
Yes.
How do you know her?
We dated and were engaged on and off about 6 years.
Were you aware of a child custody dispute between Christina Parcell and John Mello?
Yes.
And was this custody dispute ongoing from 2016 up until 2021?
Yes.
When you arrived to 122 Canebrake, what did you do?
I went to the front door and rang the doorbell.
And were you able to enter?
No, she didn't answer.
So then what did you do?
I walked around to the back door because frequently they'd leave the back door unlocked. And I walked into the back door. It was dark, quiet, and so I walked back to, down the hallway to see if she was in the bathroom or in the shower, and it was all dark. And I looked on the floor, and right at the entrance of the living room and off that hallway there were petals from like a rose. And as I looked into the room, and I saw her on her back. I walked over and yelled at her and then called 911.
At this time, on October 13th, did you know where John Mello was located?
I assumed he was in Italy.
Have you ever met Zachary Hughes?
No.
Have you ever talked to Zachary Hughes?
No.
Have you ever corresponded him with, in any way, shape, or form, through email, social media, or the like?
No.
When was the first time you knew who Zachary Hughes was?
When my attorney set a meeting to come see me, and he showed me a picture and said this person was arrested for the murder.
So Bradley Post is the person perhaps closest to the victim in this case. Fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend, on again, off again for 6 years. Has no idea who Zachary Hughes was. No interaction with him at all. Talked about John Mello, you know, the custody battle, everything that was going on there. He was in Italy at the time. But all this brings us to the first question in our investigation. It's about the defendant and the victim. How are Zachary Hughes and Christina Parcell connected? Right? Is there a way that they would know each other or somehow be connected that would make some sense of why this would happen? Joining me, journalist and founding member of Blunt Force Media. He has been inside that courtroom. Troy Stiles is with us, and South Carolina criminal defense attorney. Of course, you know her as Lawyer Lori on TikTok. Lori Murray is with us. Great to have you both here. Troy, to me, this is so important in a case like this because I mean, it could be stranger on stranger crime, right? That's always possible. But is there some sort of a connection between these two?
Yeah, Vinny. So the nexus in this case, we're told, is John Mello, who is the father of the child shared with the victim, the decedent, Christina Parcell. So we're hearing all about John Mello. We're hearing about a lot of harassment and this ongoing custody battle between the two, but we haven't seen John Mello yet in this trial. Lots to find out. I'm not sure if it's the mystery of there's a lot of mystery that's surrounding this case, but I'm not sure if it's what we're hearing that is so riveting or if it's what we're not hearing in this case.
That's interesting. And Lori, so if the nexus is going to go through John Mello, the guy who's in the custody battle with the victim here. Let's take a listen, Lori, to a little bit more of Bradley's testimony, talking about some envelopes that were received.
I received the envelope. I opened it because it was very suspicious, you know, with my return address. And I looked at it, and then I called my attorney.
Why did you call your attorney?
Because of the contents inside.
Can you describe the contents?
Yes, there were naked pictures of Miss Parcell, and if I remember right, there was a mailing list of which would kind of indicate that they were going to be sent also to those locations. Well, we thought we knew who, of course, was behind them, but we weren't sure who sent them because he was supposedly out of the country.
So who did you tell the detectives had possession of those photos of Christina Parcell without any clothes on?
Mr. Mello.
That's John Mello?
Yes.
And that is who she was engaging in a child custody dispute with over?
Yes.
All right, when you hear that little fuzz, that is the name of the child that John Mello and Christina Parcell shared, and Christina obviously dead at this point. Lori, this is like strange stuff, right? Naked pictures of the victim being sent in an envelope. She's in a custody battle. They suspect it's John Mello, but he's over in Italy. Like, what's going on here, Lori?
Well, a lot. There were approximately 1,700 WhatsApp messages between John Mello and Zachary Hughes, the defendant in this case. In those messages, John Mello is asking him to harass her, to really go after her. And I think this is part of what he did. He said, one of the messages said, "How did it go?" Zachary Hughes responded, "Great, I will let you know afterwards." Now, whether that was with regard to the murder itself or, you know, this pattern of harassment, this was not the only envelope. Multiple envelopes were sent out, but they sent them out in an effort to harass her with regard to this child custody dispute.
Okay, so now how does John Mello get connected with this pianist, right? Let's take a listen to the solicitor who's the prosecutor in the case.
Well, Zach Hughes had a relationship with John Mello starting in about October of 2020, around the time when he left for Italy. And that relationship grew. And it grew to the point where Zach Hughes began inserting himself into this custody battle at the behest of John Mello. And they began doing things like sending photos of her to the neighbors in an effort to shame her, an effort to show that she's a bad mother. And as the custody dispute it elevated into a situation where custody might not go in John Mellow's favor. And at that point, Zach Hughes made the ultimate decision.
Okay, Troy, is there a backstory here on how Mello connects with this classically trained, acclaimed pianist?
Vinny, nobody has really heard from Mello, and I actually had the opportunity to interview him now a couple of times, and the story is just incredible. And so Mello is downtown in Greenville, South Carolina, which has a beautiful backdrop, an arts district, and he actually is with the child that he shares with the victim here. And Zachary Hughes, as you mentioned, is a concert pianist, Juilliard trained. So he's performing on the streets, and he asked the daughter, would you like for me to play something for you? And she answers, Claire de Lune, which he's totally impressed by. And she is, Mello is also a musician. And so she's this charismatic child, and she's a little mature for, she's not your average for the age. And so he's very impressed by her. And then, so we learn later in our interviews that just before the murder, the alleged murder, Zachary Hughes visited Mello in Italy. And that we learned is after when the child had to be sent back to the United States under the Hague order. So is it motive? I'm not sure, but it is an incredible story. And you heard the prosecution say there that Zachary Hughes inserted himself. So we haven't seen Mello charged with conspiring to murder the victim here. So did Zachary Hughes just take it upon himself? Is the jury going to find him a good guy for doing this, or a bad guy for doing this? We're not sure what the jury's going to think about that information, or even if they're going to know.
This is really bizarre, Lori.
It is really bizarre. And honestly, there's so many levels to this, and you have to think about the child pornography issue. I know we're going to get to that probably later, but you have to really think about that child pornography issue, and that being the reason why he wants his daughter out of Christina's hands. And you have to think about whether Mello asked him to do this or whether he just did it on his own because he felt so bad for him. Personally, I know Mello has denied it repeatedly, but I think that there's a lot of evidence that shows that he probably had some kind of hand in this. Can they prove it? Not likely. Not without Zachary Hughes, and he's not talking.
We got a lot more to get to. Coming up next, why were there rose petals at the crime scene?
Approximately how many murder scenes have you processed?
Say close to 150.
You ever found flowers near the body?
No.
Nobody could believe that he would be a killer. It just didn't seem to make sense.
Today, my office filed murder charges against O.J. Simpson.
Whoa, what just happened?
It was the biggest story in the world.
The composition of that jury proved to be the most fatal error for the prosecution.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? A Court TV original series. Premieres Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
And then in this photograph, you can also see some more of the rose petals and the leaves that are leading into the hallway. So this is a photograph of the hallway while standing in the living room, just showing how some of those flower petals go into the hallway, and also the discarded pair of sunglasses that was located in the hallway as well. This is a photograph from a further point in the living room, again, just showing that entryway into the sitting room in the hallway. So this is a photograph from on top of that console table sitting in the sitting room where the victim's purse had been located, and it's just showing that some of the rose petals and stems had made it onto that table. This is showing the victim's purse that I was just referencing, and showing that the rose petals were also inside of her purse.
Approximately how many murder scenes have you processed?
Say close to 150.
You ever found flowers near the body?
No.
I haven't processed any crime scenes, but I've covered hundreds of trials. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trials. I've never seen anything quite like this. The closest we can come to is the killer clown trial, when the killer showed up dressed like a clown delivering flowers and then shot and killed the victim. But this one, they're like all over the house. What is going on here? That brings us, well, let's take a listen. This is the crime scene specialist, formerly with Greenville Forensics, describing this scene and what was found. It's gruesome on the one hand, but then there's rose petals on the other hand. Let's listen.
So this is a photograph of the interior of that front sitting room, where you can see the victim and you can see some apparent drag marks as well.
It's Exhibit 41.
That is just a different view of the same thing, showing there are stains, apparent blood stains on the couch, as well as the pulling underneath of the couch, the drag marks, and you can see right there is one of the flower stems.
And obviously we're not showing you that part because the victim's body was in that photograph. But all of this brings us to, I think, a real important question, and maybe a very revealing question in this investigation. Why? Why were there rose petals at the crime scene? Never seen it before. Still with us, Troy Skiles, and joining us, psychotherapist, author, host of Talking Live and the Bite Size Podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Troy, is there any indication as to why? Is there a deeper meaning? Is there something we don't know about these flowers?
Vinny, you know, there's been so much mystery, as I said before, so it's my own conclusion, and I believe others in the courtroom are starting to kind of lead into this, that it was the love that Christina had with Bradley Post, which in turn, you know, was involved alleged abuse of children. And, you know, Lori earlier mentioned the child pornography that ultimately caused Zachary Hughes to allegedly make the decision to murder Christina Parcell. The drag marks, the violent crime scene photos that the forensic technician was showing us in the courtroom, the jury is paying close attention to this, Vinny.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, rose petals.
So fascinating. So when I hear the story about Hughes, whose background is interesting, he came from a family where there were many adopted children from Russia, and he took a strong role in caretaking for those kids. So it makes me wonder what his feeling is about mothers, or mothers who can't show up as mothers. And I wonder if it all got twisted in his mind. So we could say that maybe the only good woman or good mother is a dead mother. Maybe there's some kind of creativity and dark twist. I don't know if there were any musical songs that he knows about that included a dead woman and it got romanticized in some way. But to me, it sounds like, you know, roses are beautiful, but they have thorns, and that's what this woman was. The dead, deceased woman is not everything that people thought she was, and she was putting a child in danger. And it sounded like it triggered a transference, that to him, it just became overwhelming, and he couldn't see the difference between his own story and this other story that he learned about through his friend.
That's so interesting. And if I put together what both of you are saying, it's starting to make a lot of sense to me in a story that doesn't make sense, right? You've got this young man who's obviously very gifted, but his mind may work different ways, but he grows up taking care of his adopted siblings, and now meets this little girl who knows all about the music and this very sophisticated palette for music, and he believes she may be being abused in this home. Troy, that makes sense. But let me ask you this, though. When you see the defendant in the courtroom, does he seem like he's a little off? Has anyone mentioned any sort of mental evaluation or you know, sometimes people look like they're not exactly like the rest of us, right?
What we know about Zachary Hughes is really from the bond hearing, and then in talking to others. I happen to be from this town, Vinnie, so I've seen Zachary Hughes myself. He's a showman. He's someone that people describe as likable, and he's a helper and a great guy. And many see him that way. And can two things be true at the same time? So I think there's this fascination about who he is and can he be this violent character. But Vinnie, the evidence so far has been very compelling. And so I think that Zachary Hughes is this, the looks on his face, you know, what I'm getting is sometimes he's a little arrogant. Sometimes he is, you know, worried. He has a worried look on his face. And you can tell that fear has set in. But, you know, he played 32 concertos and sonatas, you know, it's never been done. It was like an amazing thing that he did this. And the timing of that, Vinnie, he kind of finished those right at the mark. It took a long time for him to do all of those one by one by one. And when he finally finished them, the climax seemed to be this murder.
Unbelievable. Troy Stiles, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, thank you so much for helping us out here. When we come back, was Christina Parcell involved in child pornography? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Rose Petal murder. The crime scene looks like something out of a psycho thriller movie. A mother brutally murdered and then surrounded, and all throughout the apartment, rose petals? May seem like fiction, but it actually happened in South Carolina. Here's the story. It is known as the Rose Petal murder. Christina Parcell was violently killed and then surrounded by rose petals at the crime scene. It happened in the quiet suburban community of Greer, South Carolina. After the murder, there were a series of arrests, some which have actually raised more questions than answers. Zachary Hughes, a classically trained pianist, was charged with her murder, and many are wondering why he would allegedly do it. The father of her daughter was arrested on custodial interference and was in a custody battle with Christina, which has some people wondering if he has any connection to what happened to Christina. And finally, Christina's boyfriend was charged with child pornography, which has many others wondering whether Christina knew about it or participated in it. All of these issues seem extremely important, but are they connected to this brutal murder? There's a lot of layers to this story, like a lot of layers. This is a tough one to work through, to really understand and try to make some sense of it all. I think we're doing an okay job so far in peeling back some of those layers, but I got another big one for you right now. Take a look at this. There is a civil lawsuit. Plaintiff versus Bradley Post, the victim's fiance, and the estate of the victim, Christina Parcell. So they're suing Christina, the victim, her estate because she's not alive, and her fiance, Bradley Post. The minor child was in the custody and care of Christina Parcell at the time of defendant Parcell's death. Upon information and belief, during the course of the law enforcement investigation of Christina Parcell's murder, law enforcement discovered numerous photographs and videos of various minor children, including minor Jane Doe, in various stages of undress and in sexually explicit and nude positions, which had been taken over the course of several years. Yeah, I know what you're all thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, Stephen Stearns, Jen Soto, Madeline Soto. Petitioner is informed and believes that the photographs and videos of Jane Doe were taken by, with, and/or in the presence of defendant Post and defendant Parcell. That's Christina and her fiancé. Plaintiff is informed and believes that the defendants knowingly and intentionally forwarded sexually exploitive photographs and videos of Jane Doe to third parties to be viewed and further disseminated for viewing by others. These are allegations in a civil case, right? So they're just allegations. But the allegation is that the victim, Christina, along with her fiancé, are taking pictures of her daughter and sending them to other people. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Was Christina Parcell involved in child pornography? Is that possible? What is going on here? Joining me, investigative reporter for Fox Carolina. She was in the courtroom as well. Grace Runkle is with us. And South Carolina criminal defense attorney. You know her as Lawyer Lori on TikTok, Lori Murray. Grace, this is jaw-dropping to say the least. What is your understanding of what's going on here in terms of these allegations of child pornography?
Well, like you were saying, this is just the latest twist in a very complicated case. And this was something that we first saw in that lawsuit that you were just reading through, but we've also seen it brought up in motions filed by the defense. And the defense was really fighting to get those allegations brought up during the trial. They addressed it in those pre-trial motions. And the judge says that it's not relevant to the murder trial. They even tried to talk about the charges that her fiance Bradley Post is now facing, and he again said that's not relevant to the trial of Zachary Hughes. So as of now, the jury has not been able to learn about any of those allegations, and the state agrees with the judge, saying that it has nothing to do with the murder. The defense disagrees, saying that it really has everything to do with the murder of Christina Parcell.
I'm looking at this issue and the discussion we've been having on this program. It seems like it could potentially help prosecutors as well to explain what happened here. Let's take a look. This is Bradley Post being cross-examined about these criminal charges that he's facing.
You were also asked if you've been charged with a crime. It's actually 9 charges, is it not? Correct. Okay.
And that's it. You don't get the details of what those crimes are. But I'll tell you, take a look. These are the charges that the victim's fiance is facing. Criminal. This isn't the civil case. Criminal charges. Sexual exploitation of a minor. 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 Criminal sexual conduct with a minor. And count 9, buggery. Lori Murray. I think this is relevant, but I think it plays both ways. I think this may be the underlying factor that caused the death of Christina Parcell.
I think it absolutely has something to do with it, and the judge did not say it wasn't relevant. What he said was the probative value is outweighed by the prejudice to the jury. So the jury would be biased against the victim, maybe want to find him not guilty based on her behavior or alleged behavior, and therefore the state wanted it out, the judge kept it out. He made the right decision in this case. I mean, I think it absolutely would have been prejudicial. If the state doesn't want it in,
well, then
it shouldn't come in.
Yeah, but let's get to the truth of what's really going on here. Like, what is really, what is causing someone, presumably the defendant, to murder this woman? You know, Grace, I'm looking at this, and, you know, this guy, he's a local pianist, right? He's an artist. He's somehow connected to Mello, visited Mello in Italy, apparently, met him on the streets. He knew the victim's daughter because he knew her ex, and when her ex was with the victim's daughter. doesn't it just seem that there is a nexus here, Grace, that this is whatever's going on with this child pornography or alleged child pornography, it is the reason she's dead?
Yeah, I think that's really what the defense has been trying to hint at. And recently we heard some testimony from a guardian ad litem who was involved in the custody dispute between Mello and Parcell. And she testified that she didn't think there was any length that Mello wouldn't go to maintain custody of his daughter. And the state saying that, you know, using that comment to their side, saying that possibly this is how he was able to bring in Zachary Hughes and have Hughes act on his behalf. But again, it's something that it's very interesting. The guardian ad litem said that at the time of Parcell's death, she was recommending that the daughter stay with Parcell. And the defense, once the jury left, really tried to drive home that they should be able to ask her why her opinion might have changed after Parcell's death. And the judge did not let them address it on cross-examination, but they were able to proffer that testimony from her. And she said that she would have changed her opinion, and in fact that she would have done whatever she could to get Parcell out of the home on Canebrake Drive as quickly as possible.
Wow. Let's take a listen to that attorney who worked on the custody case, talking about Mello. Again, Mello is the father of the child. This is another fascinating twist in all of it.
Over the course of your role as guardian, approximately how many emails did you exchange with Mr. Mello?
I don't even know if I could count them. I know when we printed them for the family court trial, I think it was 3 or 4 reams of paper.
So, also in the course of once returns from Italy, did Mr. Mello continue to communicate with you?
Yes, he was continuing to communicate, harass, threaten, intimidate, bully. His communications were unlike anything I've ever encountered as a guardian, and so they continued to escalate, and I was pretty concerned.
So not getting into the specifics of maybe some of the things that he messaged you, but what kind of, when you say threats and harassment, what kinds of things was he conveying to you?
He would tell me that I always needed to be looking over my shoulder, that he was coming after my license, that I was going to get arrested for criminal charges or civil charges, that I was definitely going to jail. He mentioned my children to me by name with specific information about them at one visitation I had with him. He put terrible things on the internet about me, including my office address and phone number. He actually included my husband in his posts. He said awful things, that we were trafficking children, Ukrainian children through Spartanburg. That's like on the internet. It was Facebook and Reddit, and at one point he had said I was manufacturing child pornography in my law office and put my address and my phone number right there. So he was definitely fired up.
Okay, Lori Murray, I'm trying to make sense again in all of this, which is difficult to do. But John Mello, who's the father of the child, seemed like he was accusing his ex, the mother of the child, of being involved in this child pornography, and her fiance. And now he's going after the guardian who steps in to protect this child, the legally appointed guardian, and says she's doing it as well. Like, he's unhinged, right? So I would say, okay, yeah, nothing he says is true, John Mello. But Bradley Post, the fiance, has actually been criminally charged for this stuff. So how do we figure out what's really going on here?
I think it's baffling. First of all, you know, the police found 9 hard drives in that house with allegedly over 15,000 pictures of children. In those pictures were the daughter, one of the daughter's friends, and allegedly Christina was in those pictures with them. All of that to be said, if he thought, and we talk about this being the motive, which motive you don't have to prove, but we talk about this being the motive and Mello knowing about it, would you knowingly send your child back into that house if you knew about it? Why not call the police? Why not start an investigation instead of running this crazy smear campaign on her, instead of harassing the guardian ad litem, instead of doing all of these things? So that makes me think, did he really know? Is that really the motive? I know he didn't want the child there, but did he really know?
Yeah, this is, like I said, folks, there's a lot of layers to this. A lot of layers. All right, Grace and Lori are going to stay with us. We need them. Still to come, what is Zachary Hughes' defense?
Let me ask you this. Is the person that you just described to this jury look like the person in that photo right there?
Yes.
How so?
It just does.
A true crime tragedy out of Tennessee.
This case is unlike anything I've ever been involved in.
A 15-month-old, Evelyn Boswell, goes missing and is later found dead on her family's compound.
Her own teenage mother charged with little Evelyn's murder.
This little girl was let down by everyone in her life who was supposed to protect her.
Once you hear the evidence from that chair, you hear the evidence that's presented to you, you're going to find beyond a reasonable doubt, and the evidence will show that Zach Hughes is a cold-blooded killer. And he committed murder, he committed harassment, and he committed burglary first. Thank you.
Hey, Your Honor, may the court, the defense is going to defer opening until our case. Thank you.
Which is your right.
No opening statement from the defense. They've deferred until the end of the prosecution's case. Then they'll do their defense before they're open before their case begins. It's a strategy call, but kind of leaves the jury and everyone else sort of hanging and brings us to the next question in our investigation. What is Zachary Hughes' defense? Every defendant has one. I've been watching trials for a long time here on Court TV. Every defendant has one. So what is it? Still with me, reporter Grace Runkle's been inside that courtroom, and attorney Lori Murray. Grace, what can you tell us? Do we know, or do we get a feeling inside the courtroom, which way they're going to go with this?
Well, you said it was a surprise when they deferred their opening statement, the defense, and I think everyone's jaws dropped because we were really waiting to kind of get a little bit more understanding about what the defense's case was going to be. From reading motions filed before the trial, we have an idea that they're planning on calling their own witness, their own expert, to talk about the DNA evidence that the state has kind of teased that they're going to be bringing up, but we don't know exactly what that DNA evidence is or what that expert witness is going to focus on. And we really haven't even heard a lot of cross-examination from Hughes's defense attorneys yet. A lot of instances where they just tell the judge they don't have any questions. And when we have heard those questions, it's been kind of focusing on the circumstantial evidence. We had heard a lead investigator talk about there was a chemical smell at the crime scene, and then talk about how they found chemicals in one of the homes that Hughes had access to. But when the defense got to cross-examine that witness, they asked him, do you have cleaning chemicals in your home? And he said yes. So kind of poking holes that they don't really have that smoking gun yet to really convince the jury.
So, Lori, I know they've said they have strong evidence. They believe they have some DNA evidence, which would be absolutely powerful in this case, especially with it seems like there's a struggle at the crime scene. What are your thoughts about what the defense is or will be?
Of hiding it. I think that this deferring his opening statement was actually quite brilliant, because if they go in with an idea of what the defense says, the jury is going to try to shoot it down every time they hear a piece of evidence from the state. I think it's a really good move. And I also think that at the end of the day, he's probably going to pull a Shaggy and say it wasn't me.
What do you mean? Just say that some other dude did it and you don't have the evidence to tie me to it?
Yeah, it's a song, but I don't think that they have. I think he's going to say, you don't have enough evidence to tie me to it. I think he's going to say it was somebody else. I don't know of any other defense that there could be, because who else was it? And he can't blame it on Mello, because he's not, he's obviously not putting it on Mello. And I don't think he's going to take the stand. I think they're just going to try to poke holes through the experts and do the best they can. I don't think he can take the stand because he's at too much risk for his testimony. So at the end of the day, I think it's got to be, it wasn't me. This doesn't prove that I did it. And that's all he's going to do.
Okay, so Grace, for prosecutors, have they laid out for this jury the why of it? Why they believe, the motive, why they believe that this pianist went into the house and committed this brutal murder?
They haven't laid it out explicitly, but they keep bringing up this relationship between Hughes and John Mello, the father of Christina Parcell's daughter. They were in that custody dispute. During the opening statements from the state, they said that once things started to look like they weren't going to go the way Mello wanted, that's when Hughes inserted himself and made that ultimate decision to commit that murder. But we haven't gotten that specific, was it a request? Did he act on his own? That's something that I think the jury's missing at this point. And one thing that I think is also interesting just for the jurors, when they look out in the courtroom, there's a lot of people sitting on the side of the defense, a lot of people in Hughes's corner, and there are not a lot of people in Parcell's. So I know a lot of people have spoken to the character of Zachary Hughes. We even heard from someone who knew him for just 2 weeks while they were cleaning John Mello's house together. He said kind of offhandedly, I think he's a good guy. And I think maybe little comments like that are going to stick with the jury. But again, no real solid defense and no real connection to why exactly he may have decided to insert himself into this custody dispute.
And Lori, do you think the defense has to do something to explain what this relationship with Mello?
I think they do. Especially if Mello comes and testifies, but I'm betting he won't take the stand in this case. But they do need to have something to explain the relationship between the two of them. But the defense can sit back and say, why would he do this, and try to poke holes in the motive. But the state doesn't have to prove motive. That's not an element of the case. Malice is an element of the case. Murder is an element of the case, but the motive is not. So, they're going to, at the end of the day, say, we don't have to prove why he did it because we don't know. Only he knows, and he's not talking. What we have to prove is that he did it, and he did it with malice, and that these flowers show that premeditation.
Yeah, I personally believe prosecutors should have used the child pornography. I think it's stronger for them, but they made the choice. Grace Runkle, Lori Murray, thank you so much for your help. We appreciate it. We'll speak again. There's a lot going on in this case, but as usual, the judge has limited some of the information the jury will get to hear, especially anything related to child pornography. Now, the judge does not believe it's relevant enough, that it's too prejudicial. But for me, this story in this case is so confusing, I'm not 100% sure what is or is not relevant. Let's just hope, though, that the jury can figure it out and get to the truth. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.